What's up, everybody? My name is Kier, and you are watching the important things that really matter. Today, we're going to be talking about the best ancestry tests for African Americans. Once again, we're going to be talking about the best ancestry test for African Americans. In this test, this is not only just for African Americans, but I would also say too that this test is also for Black people around the world, period. And I'm gonna give my recommendation as far as the best test. I'm not only gonna be talking about the best test for African Americans and Black people in general around the world, but I'm not only gonna be talking about that, but I'm also gonna be talking about my journey to find out more information about myself and my family. A lot of people that were taken into slavery back in the 1600s, we were primarily taken from West Africa. And if you look at the transatlantic slave trade, how it went, the transatlantic slave trade went from the west coast of Africa to the Western Europe. So they dropped some slaves off in Western Europe. They dropped slaves off during the Caribbean islands, places like Haiti, places like St. Martin, St. Kitts, St. Croix, all the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands. Many of these islands had plantations. Many of these islands had sugar plantations. And these sugar plantations were very, very extremely hard work. So the transatlantic slave trade went through all the Caribbean islands. The transatlantic slave trade went to Western Europe, particularly England. The Portuguese participated greatly in the slave trade. Spain participated greatly in the slave trade. Also, too, the transatlantic slave trade went from the west coast of Africa to North America. The transatlantic slave trade went from the west coast of Africa to Central America and then to South America. It was interesting for me to find out that there were possibly more slaves taken into South America than there were into North America. I thought that was very, very interesting, because I thought that most of the slaves probably came to North America, then Central America and South America. But I thought a majority of them came to North America. But to my understanding, a majority of the slaves, even though there was a great deal of slaves that came to North America, there were a great deal of slaves, or even more slaves, that went to South America also too. So the estimations of the people that got carried from the west coast of Africa to Western Europe, primarily England, North America, Central America, South America, the estimates have been somewhere around about, I've been hearing somewhere around about 80 million to 100 million people were transferred all over the world, but to those main places which I just told you about. It started my journey to wanting to find out more about myself and find out more about my family. So I started out with one particular ancestry test, and then when I read the fine print, which is what I'll go into a little bit later on, and I eventually moved to another ancestry test probably about a year or so later. But anyway, I'll go into that a little bit further. So I started my journey, and part of the journey of finding out about myself and about my family was starting out by what I was exposed to in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And so, to tell you honest truth, when I was going through elementary school, middle school, and high school, I found out very little about African American history. And what's messed up is that when you are going through middle school, elementary school, and high school, and you don't hardly see yourself in these books at all, it kind of makes you feel like you really did not contribute hardly anything to society. And so it perpetuates the, I guess you could say, the white supremacist mindset that, okay, well, you really didn't contribute hardly anything to society. And even though no one really comes right out and tells you this, when you look in the history books and you see that there's very little about African Americans in the history books that from what you're being taught, then you kind of get to the point to where you're like, kind of makes you feel like maybe you are not as intelligent as the majority of people that are here in the United States, which is completely wrong. We're just as intelligent as anybody. The more and more that you do research into our history, the more you'll find out how great a people that we are and how intelligent we are. And yes, the pyramids were built in Africa, and we built them and we designed them. We built the pyramids. The pyramids were designed by black people. The pyramids were built by black people in Egypt. Not only that, there's proof that it was black people that did those things. You can look on the walls. You can look on the walls of the pyramids and see there was black people, even though the current group of people that are in Egypt right now, to my understanding, they've been going into pyramids and using acid to lighten up the skin of the people that were painted on the wall, okay? So, yeah, they don't tell you that, right, do they? No. But one thing about Egypt was first called Kemet, and Kemet is, the meaning of Kemet is land of black people. The meaning of Kemet is land of black people or city of black people. So just the name of the place itself tell you who was there and who created the city. And so we were there. We were the mathematicians. We built the pyramids. Black people designed the pyramids. Matter of fact, the pyramids, which are the Great Pyramids of Giza, that are there, they're actually, you should never build a building on sand. You should only build a building on bedrock, okay? But those pyramids were literally built on sand, okay? And they're earthquake proof. And they have been standing there for thousands of years, at least 5,000 or 6,000 years that they have been there. So it's interesting to find out that we were the ones who, black people designed the pyramids. Black people built the pyramids. This is true. So anyway, anybody tell you anything different is a liar. So also too, recently there was a white scientist that used some calculations along with some computers to determine whether black people or whether was it white people that were the rulers and the pharaohs of Egypt. And when he found out, you should have looked at the look on his face when the computer had spit out that it was black people that were the pharaohs. He looked at, he was like, no, this, he had this look like he was real pissed off, like I don't know what. He looked like he wanted to cuss. Nah, how did they build this? But back to the subject, what I was talking about. Now I'm gonna still stay on this subject just a little bit longer. What a lot of people don't realize is that those pyramids which are in Egypt are not the only pyramids in Africa. And yes, Egypt is a part of Africa. It sits on Africa's tectonic plate. It's on the continent of Africa. All right. It's not just those pyramids which are in Egypt, but in Africa, there's over 100 pyramids in Africa, over 100 pyramids in Africa, according to Dr. Yosef Ben Yakin, a black Jew, a black Hebrew, okay? And then I come to find out, actually, within the last day or so, that you had over 200 pyramids in Ethiopia and the Sudan and Nubia. I think it was Nubia, but Sudan, Ethiopia, I think just by itself had about 200 pyramids. So there's pyramids all over Africa, but the main well-known ones was right over in the Egypt. But also too, when you get to, I think it's Nubia or Sudan, there's a great pyramid there that they're not telling everybody about. And those artifacts most definitely show it was black people that built those pyramids. There's supposed to be a great pyramid over in these areas where I just talked about, over in, I think it's Nubia. I think the Nubia was once called, I think Sudan was once called Nubia. But anyway, they got statues and stuff over there, and those statues over there very, very clearly depict black people over there. So you have many, many pyramids all throughout Africa. So having said that, and yes, we built the pyramids and designed the pyramids in Egypt, black people, and because it was one type of black people that designed the pyramids and another type of black people that built the pyramids. And you got pyramids in Nubia and Sudan, and even got a great pyramid over there too, one or more. So anyway, that's a little bit about our history. But when I started off to try to find out more and more about myself, one of the things that I found out or got upset was that there was so little information told about African Americans and our history in Africa going through the public school system. Very little information. It wasn't until I got to a major Big Ten university and started doing research that I started getting really angry about what I found. And what I found by doing research in when I was at one of a major Big Ten universities here in Michigan, one of the things that I found out was that I found these books about black inventors and black scientists, African-American inventors and scientists, and African-American inventors. And when I started going through these books and trying to get all this information together, because there was a program that I was working on, when I was getting all this information, I'm finding all this information about all the stuff that we did that they refused to put in the history books. I'm like, I started getting real angry and real pissed off. I mean, like real angry. Because I'm sitting up here like, why would they not put this stuff in the history books? For example, let me give you an example of some of the African-American inventors and scientists. You have an African-American inventor and scientist by the name of Dr. Charles Drew. Dr. Charles Drew was a black man. Dr. Charles Drew was a black man. You need to look up Dr. Charles Drew. Dr. Charles Drew started blood banks in the United States and the United Kingdom. Let me say that again in case you don't know. See, before Dr. Charles Drew, who was a black doctor, a black scientist, before he came along, people did not know which blood types that you can mix together. They didn't even know that there was different blood types. They didn't know. They just knew that some blood types you couldn't put together. Nobody knew the specifics, but Dr. Charles Drew found out and broke down the different blood types, which once again was a black man that did this. He was the creator of the blood banks in the United States and the blood banks in the UK. And because of this black man's contributions, millions of people that should have died did not die because of this. And to my understanding, part of the reason why he died was people in different hospitals chose not to give him any blood transfusions because he was black, okay? So ain't that a trip, all right? The man that invented blood banks and stuff is now being refused of getting blood transfusions that he may have needed. So anyway, that's just one person, Dr. Charles Drew, who started blood banks in the United States and in England. And he's the one that found out the different blood types and which blood you can mix and which blood you could not mix together. This black man found all this information out. Very, very important information. This information saved millions and millions of people's lives around the world.